Welcome back again. We're going to be taking a look at Mesoamerica and the Andes now here with these civilizations on the periphery of the major Eurasian empires. So, in Mesoamerica, we have two major ones. We have Teotihuacan, which we can see in central Mexico, and then the Maya, which are in the Yucatan Peninsula. And we're going to start with the Maya. They're the big one. They're the famous one. They're the ones that predicted our world was going to end in 2012, and actually, they didn't predict that, but their calendar stopped then, and we misinterpreted it as the end of the world. But that's one of their major contributions. And they were only able to do this because of their ability to do complex math. They had invented zero, which we didn't see in Eurasia until India and the Gupta Empire. So these guys are highly advanced with that, able to think critically, and really fun thing with their math stuff. If you want to know, they did stuff in base 6. So you can think of how fun that would be, is seeing symbols that in their pictographic language for base 6 things. So instead of 10, you'd have a 6, and then you'd have another. It's fun stuff to try to add in. I had to do that in college. So if you want to do that, try it sometime. It's fun times. A little bit confusing, but not bad. Now, they were to do this calendar, though, because they had a great understanding of math and also astronomy. And this was also kind of part of their religious ideas there. And they were led by priests. The priests were kind of the highest level of people within the civilization. And the civilization was divided up into many city-states. But these city-states, unfortunately, didn't work together or were peaceful, like we saw with Genet Genot. They instead are kind of violent to each other. There's almost a constant warfare going on between them. And it's because they're competing for resources, as well as they need POWs for more. It might be weird to think of that you're not going to try to kill all your enemies in a battle or anything like that. Instead, you're going to try to capture as many of them alive, so then you can sacrifice them to your gods to appease them and keep the world running. We're going to see this continue when we get to the Aztecs later on. But this constant warfare didn't help them, as well as they did a great job with agriculture. They brought in more land for it, but to do that, they had to cut down rainforests, or really, maybe not rainforests per se, but heavily vegetated regions that the trees held in the soil and held in rainwater and stuff like that. They filled in swamps or drained swamps, which brought in more land to grow crops in, and so that made things really good for them. They could make a lot of food and have a larger population. But then, as soon as the environmental changes, or the environment shifts, and you get drier weather, things start going downhill, and there's the cities, the major cities are abandoned. They become overgrown. With the forest, they retake the land very quickly, and you can kind of see that in the picture up top there, where you see one of their step pyramids surrounded by a forest. That would have taken over very quickly from then, and or from the collapse. But they don't disappear. Like, people think the Mayans really disappeared after 600 CE, but they're still around today. Actually, you can see modern descendants of them. They help fight against the Aztecs with the Spanish conquistadors. So they don't disappear, and their culture definitely doesn't disappear. Their writing system and stuff will influence the Aztecs. Their calendar will influence the Aztecs. Their religious rituals will influence the Aztecs, and their ball game, a famous ball game where they got to get a ball through a hoop and use their hips and stuff like that to get it up there. That will also influence the Aztecs. So this is a major feature, a major foundation for what we might think of as Mesoamerican culture. The other major Mesoamerican civilization, Teotihuacan, was a much larger city. It was just one city too, much more centralized. And it had, at the peak, it was the largest city in Mesoamerica, with about 200,000 people. And it was highly planned. It was very architecturally sound. You can see in the left here all these little step pyramids and stuff throughout it. You had some giant pyramids, the giant sun and moon pyramids, which were temples. But one of the cool things, because of how much it was planned, they believe that it was used to capture water. So then you can see the second image here that looks like it's CGI'd with water on top of it, or it's like a reflecting pool. And that's because that's one of our guesses of what it was, and that they could hold water in there for crops and things like that during a rainy season. These temples, step pyramids, and everything were highly decorated. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been defaced, but not because of people going through and doing it, but actually the Teotihuacan people themselves. We don't know what happened in their collapse, but it was kind of violent. There's fires that we can see that scorched things. The murals and stuff were destroyed, so we don't know if there was a revolution in there, if it was outside invaders coming in and tearing things down. But this empire reaches a violent end around 600 CE, and just kind of disappears. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of records to actually explain what happened. And so that's all for Mesoamerica now. The last major one, the Aztecs, we'll see in Unit 3, or we'll look at the start of Unit 4 to kind of set up the Spanish conquistadors coming in. And then we'll look at South America, and there are 4 major ones we'll look at here. The first 2 are the Chavin and Moche. Chavin are one of the older civilizations here. We had seen older with those first civilizations, but these guys kind of will lay as a foundation for the, at least start a little bit on the foundation with animal spirits and having a highly religious people, as well as focusing on trade and being a major conduit between trade in the Pacific Ocean and the Amazon basin, or the Amazon rainforest. We'll also see a strict hierarchy in these Chavin cultures, but one thing to take into account is this isn't like an empire or anything like that we see. It's like a loose confederation of people, or loose grouping of people together that had a similar culture in their religion. And so you have this major cult going on. You have these priests that would get hopped up on hallucinogenic I shouldn't say mushrooms, but herbs and stuff like that, to then experience their spirit animals. And that was a major practice back then, to kind of bring the people together, and it was the center of the culture. The Moche, on the other hand, don't have that same religion, but it builds off of that, in that you have these priests at the top that are also warriors that help govern things. You see a little bit of a similar theme to their predecessors, or their counterparts in Mesoamerica, with their sacrificing a prisoner of war to the gods, as well as they have very elaborate burial ceremonies that we can see. This civilization is more agriculturally based. They use maize, squash, and beans, and they also have a amazing craftsmanship that will be passed on, and we'll see this laying a foundation for the Wari and Tiwanaku, and then later the very famous Incan empires. Their collapse is due to the environment again. You have shifting environmental patterns. That's going to disrupt the farming, and that's going to really hurt you. And as well, on top of that, you have invaders coming in and knocking them out. Now, the last 2 we'll take a look at, the Wari and Tiwanaku. They're around at the same time. The Wari are in northern Peru. The Tiwanaku are in southern Peru. And they focus both on trade. They're heavily focused on trade, getting stuff from the coastal regions to the inlands, into the Andes and things like that. They will also spread their pottery and textile designs. That's a lot of what the Wari do. And you can see those here in the pictures, and as well as their building style in the picture up top. The Tiwanaku style of, that should say fitted, not itted. I apologize there for the architectural mistake there. But they had fitted arches, so all those blocks fit together very, very tightly. They are highly crafted, whereas if you look at the Wari, they use a little bit more plaster in it to kind of keep it together, but still fairly well designed. Wari are also a little bit different in that they use roads and had a great road complex to connect their peoples. But this was necessary because they're in the mountains, and so to get through the mountains, it's going to make things a lot better to do that. And so also because in the mountains, when it comes to farming, they're going to want to get a surplus, but you can't just farm on a mountainside. Instead, you have to do some terracing, and so they terrace the mountains, which we're going to see the Incas when we get there. They do that a lot as well, whereas the Tiwa are more in lowlands areas, and so they will fill in swamps to then grow their crops on. And because these guys focused on trade, and also because they decided to settle in pretty distinct different regions, um, or different types of geographic regions, I should say. There's not a lot of fighting between them within those empires or civilizations and between them, even though they're at the same time. Uh, Again, because the Tiwanaku are looking to settle in the valleys and in the lowlands areas, whereas the Wari are in the mountains and building terraces to build their farms and civilization zones. So they kind of found a way to coexist. But both will disappear around 1000 CE, and the vacuum left there will eventually allow a group known as the Inca to rise up and conquer the largest territory, become the largest conquerors or largest empire in the region until we get to the Spanish conquistadors who make a much larger empire. And that's about everything here for these civilizations on the periphery. You can see there's a lot smaller. They're a lot smaller. We don't have enough as much information on them as we do with the Eurasian empires. But that doesn't mean their civilizations are any less valid or less important to the scope of world history.